The boy had never spoken to a stranger before. Not like that, not with that kind of certainty. He was maybe 5, possibly 6, wearing a blue and gray hockey jersey 2 sizes too big for him, the hem hanging past his knees. He came around the corner of the hotel corridor at a full run, arms pumping, socks sliding on the polished marble, and when he saw Adrian Kowalski crouched beside an open electrical panel near the service elevator, he stopped so suddenly that he skidded forward half a foot before catching himself. Adrian did not look up immediately. He had learned with his daughter that the worst thing an adult could do in that moment was make the decision for the child. The boy stared at him. Then he walked forward, slowly now, with the careful gravity of someone approaching something important, and before Adrian could register what was happening, the boy had pressed both palms flat against his chest and buried his face in his work shirt. "Your hands," the boy said, muffled. "Very quiet. Your hands smell like my dad's hands." Adrian went still. He had large hands, calloused from 20 years of work, permanently stained at the knuckle lines with traces of grease that no amount of scrubbing fully removed. They smelled, he knew, of the specific combination that came from a life spent inside mechanical systems, machine oil, copper wire, the faint sweetness of industrial solvent. He had never thought of it as a smell anyone would remember. The boy was still holding on. From down the corridor he heard heels, fast, purposeful, the sound of someone moving with the precision of a person who had learned that speed was a form of authority. He looked up. Renata Voss arrived the way weather arrives. Not gradually, but all at once, filling the available space. She was taller than he expected, dressed in a slate blazer and dark trousers, a phone in one hand and a room key in the other, the specific look of a woman who had not stopped moving all day and was not planning to. Her dark hair was pulled back with the functional simplicity of someone who had no patience for distraction. Her eyes found her son first, then moved to Adrian. The shift took less than a second. "Theo." Her voice was quiet and absolute. "Come here." Theo did not move. He had loosened his grip on Adrian's shirt but had not released it. He looked at his mother with the calm of a child who had already made a decision and was waiting for the adults to understand it. "His hands," Theo said. "They smell like Dad's hands." Something moved across Renata Voss's face and was gone. "Theo," she said again. Now, she was looking at Adrian. Not with fear, exactly, but with the specific alertness of someone who has learned to trust their instincts about what does and does not belong in a space. He was a maintenance technician in a 5-star hotel. He was crouching beside an electrical panel on the 8th floor, which was the executive residence floor, where guests paid for the particular comfort of not encountering service staff in the corridors. "I have a work order," Adrian said. He kept his voice even. He was good at keeping his voice even. "Panel's been tripping the circuit for the corner suite. I can show you my badge and the order number if you'd like. I'd like you to step away from my son." "Ma'am, I haven't touched him. He came to me. I can see that." Her voice was precise. "I'm asking you to step back." Adrian stood slowly, hands visible, and took 2 steps to the side. Theo made a small sound of protest but let go. 2 members of the hotel security team arrived within minutes, summoned by the quiet alert Renata had sent from her phone without Adrian seeing her do it. They were professional and courteous and entirely thorough. They checked his contractor credentials against the hotel's service registry. They verified the work order with the facilities manager on duty. They found nothing irregular. They thanked him and asked him to complete his work and return to the service level when he was done. He collected his tools and finished the panel repair in 40 minutes, working with the economical precision that had always been his way. He did not rush and he did not linger. When he was done, the circuit held clean, which was the only outcome that had ever really mattered to him. He did not expect to think about it again. He was wrong about that. Adrian Kowalski had come to Toronto from Sudbury when he was 22, following a job offer that turned into a career and then into a life. He was 41 now, broad-shouldered, not tall, with gray coming in at his temples and the particular quietness of a man who had learned early that the most important work was usually the work no one was watching. He had a degree in electrical engineering from Laurentian. He had never told anyone at the hotel this. It had not seemed relevant. The degree had been used and then set aside after the kind of loss that reorganizes a person's priorities without asking permission. His wife, Mara, had died of a sudden cardiac event when their daughter, Penny, was 3. No warning, no history. One afternoon, she had been in the kitchen making tea, and by the time the paramedics arrived, she was already gone. Adrian had stood in the hospital hallway for a long time after, holding Penny against his chest, not sure yet what kind of man the next version of his life required him to be. He had figured it out, more or less. He worked steady hours, picked Penny up from school every afternoon at 3:15, made dinner from scratch 4 nights a week, and read to her every night until she fell asleep. She was 7 now, small and serious, with her mother's way of watching a room before she decided whether to enter it. He had taught Thelma to sew, after a fashion. He had learned every bus route between their apartment and the school. He had made peace with the fact that he was better at fixing broken things than at most of the rituals of ordinary social life, and that this was not a flaw so much as an orientation. He was not unhappy. He had stopped thinking of his life in those terms. He had something more durable than happiness. He had Penny, and the particular meaning that came from being entirely necessary to another person. That night, after he had picked her up and made pasta, and listened to her describe, in considerable detail, an argument between 2 of her classmates about whether penguins could be trained to play hockey, he sat at the kitchen table and found himself thinking about the boy in the corridor. Not about the boy, exactly. About what the boy had said. "Your hands smell like my dad's hands," the certainty in it. The absence of any searching. The boy had not been trying to remember something. He had already remembered it. He had encountered something specific and real, and had simply named it. Adrian turned his own hands over on the table and looked at them. He thought about Theo's father. He did not know anything about him. He knew only that the boy had used the past tense in a way that sat differently from the way children usually spoke, with a specificity that did not belong to ordinary loss. He did not know why he was thinking about this. He had no reason to think it had anything to do with him. He put it away and went to check on Penny. He returned to the hotel the following Tuesday for a scheduled maintenance inspection on the 8th floor's HVAC system. It was routine work, the kind of visit logged months in advance in the service calendar. He had no particular reason to expect to encounter Renata Voss or her son. Did not go looking. He was in the mechanical room adjacent to the corridor when he heard the boy's voice through the wall. Clear and immediate, the way children's voices carry through institutional spaces. "I want to see him again." A pause. "We don't know him, Theo. I know his hands." Longer. "That's not the same thing. Why not?" Adrian stopped what he was doing and stood very still. He was not trying to eavesdrop. He was simply a person who had learned over many years in buildings that walls carried more than structure. He heard Renata say something he couldn't make out. Then he heard Theo say, with the cheerful finality of a child who has decided an argument is over, "I'm going to ask him about the smell, Theo." But there were already footsteps in the corridor. Small, fast ones. Adrian had just stepped out of the mechanical room when Theo appeared around the corner, moving at his characteristic full speed. He stopped when he saw Adrian, and his face arranged itself into the specific expression of a person who has found exactly what they were looking for. "Hi," Theo said. "Hello," Adrian said. "I told my mom I was going to ask you." "Ask me what?" Theo was looking at his hands with the focused attention of a small scientist. "What does it smell like?" "Your hands." Adrian considered this. "Oil, mostly. Copper. Some cleaning solvent. Dad's hands smelled like that. He fixed engines." Theo looked up. "Not like cars, like big engines." "On boats, Adrian." "To your dad." Theo answered with the directness that children bring to facts they have been given but not yet fully made sense of. "He died in an accident on the water 14 months ago." He paused. "I counted." "I'm sorry," Adrian said. Mom doesn't talk about it much. He paused again. She's sad. She thinks I don't know, but I do. Renata arrived then, moving quickly, arriving just in time to hear the last of it. She looked at Adrian with an expression that was harder to read than the one she had worn the first time. Not alarm now. Something more complicated. Theo, she said. Her voice was gentler than it had been before. We were just talking, Theo said preemptively. I can see that. She looked at Adrian. I'm sorry if he didn't, Adrian said. He was fine. She studied him for a moment with the particular assessment of someone who is good at reading people and is currently doing so whether they mean to or not. You're not what I expected, she said. When I looked you up. Adrian was quiet. You looked me up. You were alone with my son in a hotel corridor. Of course I looked you up. She said it without apology. Your name, your employer, your contractor record. You've been with the same facilities company for 9 years. No complaints. 2 commendations. She paused. The facilities manager says you're the only person on staff who can calibrate the building's primary HVAC without the manufacturer's manual. The manual is incomplete, Adrian said. Something shifted in her expression, very slightly. He said that too, she said. Adrian waited. Nathaniel, my husband, he used to say that about the marine systems he worked on, that the manual was always the last place to look. She glanced down at Theo, who was now examining the baseboards with the focused disinterest of a child pretending not to listen. He said the person who really understood a system had already moved past what the documentation told them. The corridor was very quiet. The hotel held its breath around them. I should let you get back to work, Renata said. Yes, Adrian said. She guided Theo down the corridor with a hand on his shoulder. At the turn, Theo looked back. He raised one hand in a small, serious wave. Adrian raised his in return. He stood in the corridor for a moment after they rounded the corner. Then he went back to the HVAC system and finished what he had come to do. That night, he found himself doing something he had not done in years. He went through the box. There was one box in the back of the closet, cardboard, sealed with brown tape that he had applied 4 years ago when he packed up the last of his things from the apartment and moved to the house. He had not opened it since. He had told himself it was because he had no reason to, which was true. But he had also known, in the way you know things you do not examine, that he was not ready. He opened it now. He went through it methodically, the way he went through everything. Old documents, a photograph or two, the small accumulated objects of a life before the version of himself he currently inhabited. At the bottom, in a folded piece of cloth, he found the thing he had not remembered he was looking for. A small wrench, scarred at the head, the handle worn smooth at the grip. A gift from his father when he was 16, the kind of tool that becomes an extension of a hand through years of use. He had taken it to every job for 15 years and then stopped bringing it and eventually stopped knowing where it was. He held it under the kitchen light. The grip was exactly as he remembered. He thought about what Theo had said. I know his hands. He put the wrench in his jacket pocket, not sure why, and went to bed and did not sleep for a long time. The call came on a Thursday. He was in the basement utility corridor when his work phone rang, showing the hotel's main reception number. The front desk manager told him that a guest had requested to speak with him by name. She sounded slightly uncertain about this, as though it had not happened before, which, to his knowledge, it had not. Renata Voss was waiting for him near the lobby cafe, at a small table beside the window that looked onto the street. She was not wearing her blazer. She was dressed more quietly, a gray sweater, dark jeans, and she looked, Adrian thought, like a person who had decided to be a different version of themselves for the duration of this conversation. She had a coffee in front of her and a folder on the table. She waited until he had sat down. I'm not entirely sure why I'm doing this, she said, which is unusual for me. You don't need to explain, Adrian said. I think I do. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. Theo has not responded to anyone the way he responded to you, not since Nathaniel died. He's been, she paused, selecting the word carefully, sealed up, in the way that children go quiet when they are holding something they don't have language for yet. Adrian waited. He talks about his father, but only the facts. The things he knows he's allowed to know. He doesn't ask about how Nathaniel smelled or sounded, or the specific way he had of doing things. He stopped asking about those details about 6 months after the accident. She looked at her coffee. I think because he saw that they made me fall apart. Children protect their parents, even the very young ones. Adrian thought of Penny and the careful way she sometimes asked him if he was okay, already watching his face as she asked it, prepared to adjust her answer based on what she found. Then you walked out of that service room, Renata said, and he grabbed you. I know, Adrian said. He hasn't grabbed anyone in 14 months. She looked up. Not me, not my mother, not his teachers. He's affectionate in his own way, but this. She stopped. This was different. She opened the folder. Inside was a printed page, a marine incident report. She pushed it across the table toward him. Nathaniel was working a job on Georgian Bay, a vessel mechanical failure during a storm. He went in to assess the engine room at night, alone, which he should not have done. She paused. There was a secondary fuel leak. The explosion was contained to the engine room. The official report says he died of injuries sustained before anyone could reach him. She touched the edge of the paper. What the official report does not say, because it was noted and then removed from the final summary at the coroner's request for brevity, is that the investigation found evidence of someone else in that engine room before the emergency crew arrived. Adrian was very still. A second set of boot prints tracked through the spill. A section of the fuel line that had been manually clamped with a makeshift tool, which the investigating engineer noted in his preliminary report, slowed the secondary leak significantly. She pulled out a second page. Nathaniel was found nearer to the emergency hatch than the explosion's point of origin would explain. The investigator wrote that it appeared he had been moved. Adrian looked at the pages without touching them. The boat you were contracted to on the 14th of October, 3 years ago, Renata said. Her voice was even and deliberate. Was the Ardith Crane. The name landed like something physical. The Ardith Crane. The late-season job. The storm that came in fast off the Georgian Bay and hit while they were still in the mechanical room, him and a consultant he had met for the first time that day. A quiet man with a serious way of listening who had pulled on a set of coveralls over his work clothes and said, simply, "Show me what you're working with," and then had understood the system in the way that only people with genuine aptitude understand complex systems. Not by reading it, but by feeling their way through it, following the causes to their effects. The fuel leak had come after the second wave hit. Adrian had been at the access panel. The consultant, Nathaniel, though Adrian had only known his first name at the time, had been closer to the line when it gave. He had gone back in. That was the part he never talked about and had mostly stopped thinking about. The explosion had already happened, and the smoke was thick, and the emergency crew was still 3 minutes out, and he had gone back into the engine room because the man had gone in to help him, and he could not stand in the corridor and wait. He had found him conscious, barely, against the far wall, had pulled him toward the hatch by the collar of his coveralls, had applied the emergency clamp to the leaking line with the small wrench from his pocket, the one his father had given him when he was 16, because it was the right size and it was what he had, and sometimes that was all there was. The emergency crew had taken over the moment they arrived. Adrian had been pulled onto the deck, coughing, his jacket gone. He had wrapped it around Nathaniel to stop the shivering, and someone had put a blanket around him, and he had sat on the deck in the rain and not said anything for a long time. He had never known the man's last name. He had asked the following week and been told only that the consultant had been transported to hospital and had not survived. He had not pushed further because the grief of strangers is not something you are entitled to, and because he had not known what he would have done with more information even if he had received it. He had taken the wrench home and put it in the box. He said none of this in the hotel cafe. He sat with it for a long moment, and then he said, "I was there." Renata did not say anything. I didn't know his last name, Adrian said. He introduced himself as Nathaniel. We worked together for about 3 hours before the storm hit. I know, Renata said. Her voice was very careful. The preliminary report had a note. The facility's contractor who had been assigned to the engine room that day. It took me 8 months to track the company back to the hotel here. Another 4 to match the employee roster to the day. She paused, and then Theo found you first. The cafe made its small sounds around them. A woman at the next table read something on her phone. A child by the window dropped a spoon and picked it up. He didn't make it, Adrian said. It was not a question. No, I didn't know that for certain, I asked, but I understand. She was looking at the table. You couldn't have done more than you did. The investigation was clear about that. That's not why He stopped. I know, she said. I know that's not why. She looked up. You went back in. He said nothing. You went back in for a man you had known for 3 hours. Her voice had changed, some load in it shifting. He had a 5-year-old at home, and a wife who didn't know yet that he wasn't coming back. The window showed them the street, people moving past, the ordinary momentum of a Thursday afternoon. Theo was in the car, Renata said. He wasn't on the boat, he was with my mother. But Nathaniel, he had your jacket when they brought him out. He had been wearing it. She paused. I only learned that detail last year. My mother-in-law sent me the inventory report from the hospital. I didn't know whose jacket it was. I thought. She stopped. I thought it was something they'd found on the boat. Adrian thought about the wrench in his jacket pocket. He reached in now without planning to and set it on the table between them. Renata looked at it. He used it, Adrian said, in the engine room. He had better leverage on the fitting than I did. He looked at the tool. I took it back when the crew arrived. I don't know why. I didn't think about it. It was my father's. I picked it up. Renata reached out and touched the handle of the wrench with 2 fingers. Very lightly, the way you touch something you are not sure is real. He would have talked about this, she said softly. If he'd lived, he would have come home and spent all of dinner talking about the man in the engine room who understood the system better than the design documentation. Her voice was quiet but steady. He did that. He came home from jobs and told me about the people he had worked with, the ones who really knew what they were doing. She withdrew her hand. He wouldn't have let this go without saying something. Neither of them spoke for a while. What do I do with this? She said finally. Not to him exactly, to the question itself. I don't know, Adrian said. I've been trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do with it since Tuesday. Theo will want to know, yes. Not all of it, not yet. She looked at him. But enough. Enough, Adrian agreed. He came back on a Saturday. Renata had suggested it in the careful, practical way she had of proposing things she had decided mattered. He brought Penny, who shook Theo's hand with great seriousness and then immediately asked him if he had ever seen a real engine up close, which established a sufficient basis for friendship that they disappeared into the hotel room's sitting area with Theo's building blocks within 3 minutes. Renata made coffee in the small kitchen. They sat at the table while the children built something in the next room that Theo narrated extensively, and Penny assessed with occasional skeptical commentary. They did not talk about the boat. They talked about other things. He learned that she ran a marine infrastructure firm, that she had built it from a regional surveying company over 12 years, that she had taken 8 months of leave after Nathaniel died and returned to work, not because she was ready, but because work had always been the architecture of her days, and she had needed the structure. She learned that he had grown up in Sudbury, that his father had been a miner who spent his Sundays rebuilding small engines on the kitchen table, that Penny's favorite food was pierogies with too much butter, that he had read the same chapter of the same book to Penny every night for 3 weeks because she had asked him to, and he had understood that what she needed was not a new story, but the same one, repeated until it became solid. That's what she needed, Renata said. She was looking at her coffee. The same story, repeated. She paused. I kept thinking I should move forward. Everyone kept telling me to move forward. Like grief was a direction. It's not, Adrian said. No. From the other room, Theo announced that they had completed a fire station, and Penny's voice said that it didn't have enough doors, and Theo considered this and said that was a fair point. Renata smiled. It changed her face considerably. He came back the week after that, and the one after. He and Renata were careful with each other, and honest, and sometimes both at once, which was harder but more durable. There were conversations that were difficult and stretches of quiet that were not. She challenged him once about whether he was holding Penny back from things by being too protective of their small, steady world, and he sat with that for several days before admitting she was probably right, which he told her on a Tuesday evening while helping Theo disassemble and correctly reassemble a battery-powered toy car that had stopped working. "You're good at that," she said, watching him. "The car or the admitting?" "Both," she said, "though the second one took you 4 days. 3.5, he said. Theo looked up from the car to see if this was an argument, determined that it was not, and returned to watching Adrian's hands with the focused attention he brought to everything Adrian did with tools. On a cold afternoon in late November, the four of them walked along the waterfront. The lake was gray and enormous and indifferent, and the wind came off it with the specific quality of a Canadian waterfront winter, the kind of cold that doesn't ask permission. Theo walked between them for a while, then drifted ahead to look at something on the shore. Penny followed him, as she often did now, which still surprised Adrian with its ease. He and Renata walked behind them. "He asked me last night," she said, "about his dad, the details, how he smelled, what his hands felt like." She kept her eyes on the children. "I told him. I sat with him for an hour and told him everything I could remember." "Good," Adrian said. "He asked if you knew what his dad's hands felt like." She paused. "I said yes. I said you had worked together and you remembered him." "That's true. I know." She was quiet for a moment. "He asked if you were going to be around." Adrian watched Penny crouch beside Theo to look at whatever he had found on the ground, their heads close together, two children comparing notes on something neither of the adults could see from here. "I intend to be," he said. Renata nodded, very slightly. They walked, and the lake moved beside them, gray and cold and continuous the way certain things are that have no intention of stopping. Theo turned from the shore and ran back toward them, something small and flat held carefully in his palm. A piece of lake glass, worn smooth by years of water and stone. "For you," he told Adrian. He pressed the glass into Adrian's hand with the simple authority of someone who has decided something and sees no reason to make it complicated. Adrian closed his fingers around it. It was the shape of nothing in particular, and had no obvious value, and he knew without thinking about it that he would carry it in his pocket for a long time. Some things you hold on to not because you chose them, but because when they find their way into your hand, the only honest thing is to hold on.